Good morning, and welcome to How Are We Here, my little series where we look at how other, usually older, cultures and its people thought we got here. This time, I found an old tale of how the Cherokee, an indigenous, native, Northern American tribe, say how we got here. As I've spent time searching the interwebs for old stories on the world's creation, I came across this story from the Cherokee people. There are a lot of tribes in Northern America, and many stories have probably been lost. Like a lot of the creation stories I have gone over, it was an oral tradition, and unfortunately, many of those stories probably did not survive till modern times. Over 100 years ago, in the year 1900, James Mooney published a book entitled Myths of the Cherokee. A note that should be made: the Cherokees' myth describes the creation of where they lived. They were eventually pushed west by the colonizers, but kept the stories so its people would remember where they came from. James Mooney, he would comment that it would be hard to date just how old these stories are. Hundreds, if not thousands of years old. His comment would be, as our grandmothers, our storytellers, would begin a story with "Once upon a time," the Cherokee storyteller would begin theirs with, "This is what the old men would tell me when I was a boy." The Earth is a great island floating in a sea of water, and suspended at each of the four cardinal points by a cord hanging down from the sky vault, which is of solid rock. When the world grows old and is worn out, the people will die, and the cords will break and let the earth sink down into the ocean, and all will be water again. We are afraid of this. When all was water, the animals were above in Lati. I apologize for the mispronunciation. This was the land beyond the arch. It would be very much crowded, and they were wanting more rum. They wondered what was below the water, and at last Dâyuni'sî, Beaver's grandchild, the little water beetle, offered to go and see if it could learn. It darted in every direction over the surface of the water, but could find no firm place to rest. Then it dived to the bottom, and came up with some soft mud. That began to grow and spread on every side, until it became the island which we call the earth. It was afterward fashioned to the sky with four cords, but no one remembers who did this. At first, the earth was flat and very soft and wet. The animals above would be very anxious to go down, and they sent out different birds to see if it was yet dry. But the birds found no place to sit, so they came back again to the Lati. At last it seemed to be time, and they sent out the buzzard and told him to go and make ready for them. This was the great buzzard, the father of all buzzards we see now. He flew all over the earth, low down near the ground, and it was still soft. Then he reached the Cherokee country. He was very tired, and his wings they began to flap and strike the ground, and wherever they struck the earth there was a valley, and where they turned up again there was a mountain. When the animals above saw this, they were afraid that the whole world would be mountains, so they called him back. But the Cherokee country remains full of mountains to this very day. When the earth was dry and the animals they came down, it was still dark, so they got the sun and they set it in a track to go every day across the island from east to west, just overhead. It was too hot this way though, and Tiska Gali, or the red crawfish, had his shell scorched a bright red, so that its meat was spoilt. So the Cherokee, they do not eat that. The conjurers put the sun another hand's breadth higher in the air, but it was still too hot. They raised it another time, and another, until it was 7 handbreadths high, and just under the sky arch. Then it was right, and they left it so. This is why the conjurers call the highest place Gakawigan Dagal Unlatun, the seventh height, because it is 7 handbreadths above the earth. Every day the sun goes along under this arch and returns at night on the upper side of the starting place. There is another world under this one, and it is like ours in everything: animals, plants, and people. All is the same, save for the seasons. Those are different. The streams that come down from the mountains are the trails by which we reach this underworld, and the water springs at their heads are the doorway by which we enter. But to do this, one must fast first, and then go to the water, and have one of the underground people for a guide. We know that the seasons in the underworld are different from ours, because the water in these watery springs is always warmer in the winter and cooler in the summer than that of the outer air. Men, we came after the animals and plants. At first, there was only a brother and a sister, until he struck her with a fish and told her to multiply, and so it was. That is so weird. In 7 days, a child was born to her. That is very fast. And thereafter, every 7 days, another, and they increased very fast until there was danger that the world could not keep them. Then, by who we're still not sure, it was made that a woman should have only one child a year, and it has been so ever since. So that is a tale of how the world was made, according to the Cherokee. But we do have a couple more tales to cover in this video. A couple other stories detailing the origins of other important aspects of the Cherokee life. I read how the world was made almost word for word from the book I had. The next two aren't really word for word, so if you feel like it, look up the original stories from the book or the interwebs. Anywho, we'll start with how the animals and plants respond to mankind in The Origin of Medicine. In the old days, the old men would tell of peace throughout the earth, and mankind lived in friendship and harmony with the great beasts of creation. Eventually, mankind's numbers grew, and the animals were forced to find new habitats. Annoyed, the animals didn't really complain. They assumed mankind would be satisfied eventually. But man eventually made weapons, bows and arrows, axes, spears, and hooks. They were used to hunt and kill the animals of the forest. The animals at first were incredulous. Soon they became enraged, though, by this show of bloodthirsty contempt. They knew they needed a plan for their own safety and survival. The Bear Tribe was the first tribe to meet in council, presided over by White Bear, their chief. One after another, members of the tribe stood up and reported the appalling atrocities their families had suffered. Mankind had mutilated their bodies, devoured their flesh, skinned them for clothes, and displayed their severed heads on wooden stakes as trophies. The Bears decided on how to deal with such hostility. It was unanimously agreed, and it involved war. The Bears discussed strategy, and someone brought up weapons. They all fell silent, knowing that humans had one direct advantage over them. "We should turn man's own instruments against him," announced one of the elder bears. "Let's go and find one of these bowls, together with some arrows, and copy their design." And in short order, the bears had a bow. The chief called for a strong piece of locust wood, and he constructed the bow. Then one of the younger bears provided a piece of his own gut for the string, and soon the weapon was completed, ready for its first testing. The strongest, most agile of the bears volunteered his services. He had little trouble drawing back the bow, but his long claws caused problems in the draw, and he could not shoot the arrow. He quickly realized that his claws were too long, so he trimmed them. After trimming his claws, he let a second arrow fly, and it hit its target successfully. Delighted with himself, he turned to face the chief, but White Bear did not appear at all pleased by the result. "We need our claws to climb trees," he wisely proclaimed. "If we cut off our claws, we will not be able to climb or hunt down prey, and soon we would all starve together." He sent the other bears off to find a better solution in the forest. The deer also held council under their chief, Little Deer. After they had aired their complaints, the death of their comrades, they came to a decision. If any human hunter should attempt to slay one of them without first asking a suitable pardon, he would be struck down by rheumatism. Notice of this decision was sent out to all the villages of the Cherokee, and people were instructed what to do if they needed to kill any of the deer tribe. So now, whenever a deer is hit by an arrow, Little Deer, who moves faster than the wind and can never be wounded, runs to the spot where the victim has fallen, and bending over the pool of blood, he asks the spirit of the deer whether or not he heard the hunter's plea for pardon. If the reply is yes, the hunter remains fit and well, but if the answer is no, then Little Deer tracks him to his home and strikes him down with rheumatism, transforming him into a helpless cripple. The fishes and the reptiles were the next to gather. They held their own council, which only lasted a few minutes, where it was decided that those who tortured or killed any of their species, they would be tormented by nightmarish visions of slimy serpents with foul breath twining around their limbs and throats, very slowly choking them to death. Or else, these brutal attackers, they would dream day and night of eating raw, decaying fish, causing them to refuse all food, and they would sicken and die as a result. Wow. Just wow. Fish and reptiles, you go, guys. And finally, the birds, insects, and smaller animals held their own meeting, presided over by the grub worm. Each creature, he announced, should come forward and state its point of view, and if the consensus was against mankind, the entire race should be put to death by the most cruel and painful means. Frog was the first, and he delivered his tirade in a loud and angry voice. Something will have to be done to stop the spread of this human menace, he thundered. See how they have kicked me and beaten me with sticks because they think I'm ugly? Now my back is covered with sores that will never disappear. And he pointed to the spots on his skin for everyone around him to see. Next, a group of birds condemned mankind for the way they were impaled on a stick and burned over a fire. The complaints continued, except for the small ground squirrel, who had seldom been a victim because of his tiny size. None of the others gathered held back in their anger. They showed no restraint or compassion toward the human race. As these little guys discussed different lethal diseases for the human population, and the list grew longer, the grub worm shook with laughter and glee as he fell over backwards, and he could not get back on his feet. So he had to wiggle off on his back, and he has done so ever since that day. Only the plants, they remain friendly towards man. And before long, every tree, shrub, and herb, down even to the wild grasses and mosses, they all agreed that some remedy for the diseases now hanging thick in the air needed to come about. So, each plant affirmed, we will help mankind in his hour of need. Every one of us shall assist in the struggle against sickness and disease, and hope that, in return, the earth will be restored to order. And even the weeds in the fields were endowed with healing properties. And in time, every tribe boasted a shaman, a great healer, capable of hearing the spirit voices of the plants speaking to him whenever he was in doubt about a cure. It is why, in this way, that the very first medicine came into being, ensuring the survival of the human race, which had come so perilously close to its own destruction. So, we also do have a divine great spirit. His name is Unetlanvhi, and it's a Cherokee word that means great spirit or creator. They are a divine spirit that is omnipotent, omnipresent, and omniscient. Now, I don't have much about him, but I do so love the great gods and divine spirits and divine gods, so I want to cover a little bit. They are considered to be the divine spirit with no human form or attributes, and is not normally personified in Cherokee myths. We didn't cover him much in these stories. Like other religions and deities, some say he was the reason the animals went down to the New World. He is the reason behind these things happening. A couple stories you should feel free to look up are the origins of the strawberries, where he helps a couple reunite through strawberries, and also the first fire, where when the animals were cold from the elements, he struck a tree with lightning, giving animals fire and warmth. I just want to touch on a bit because, a lot of these stories I've done have some kind of central god, even though the Cherokee story didn't. I felt it would behove me to point him out. So, we got wrap-up time again. First, I'd like to apologize if I made any cultural snubs. As always, I'm just some guy who does a little research and then tries to spit it all back out at ya. I'm a little grateful to James Mooney for trying to document what he could. It saddens me that much of these stories were probably lost in translation, or as the Cherokee were decimated and forced to relocate. I'm always a sucker for divine God-like spirits, and the few stories I did find, I know there are more out there, and I hope I'll get a chance to read more on them later, but the ones I did find about the Cherokees were interesting. But it was hard to trace a narrative. I am sure smarter people than I have done it, but it was still difficult for me. It's one of the reasons I think people are so fascinated by Greek religion. Those gods were written about and not solely relied upon oral traditions. So we have a whole plethora of stories. One with the Native Americans, the Cherokee in particular for this video, it's all scattered and segmented, and I think that sucks. But anyways, I really do not have much more of a wrap up, just as some of the stories not really pertaining to the creation will probably end up as videos in my other series, Tales from Someone Else. I know the origin of Game and Corn should be released in a month or two, so if you like these Cherokee stories I touched on, please stay tuned for more. Hey, wait, just 1 or 2 more minutes, so please stick around. Thank you all so much for clicking on this video. I hope I did justice to this old Cherokee creation tale. Their story of how the world was made and how we all might have got here was fun. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please do the whole YouTube's thing. Subscribe, share, comment, and like the video. It's a couple seconds for you, but it really brightens my day. I often wonder how many of you, the viewers, are actually hearing and maybe even enjoying these tales. Doing those 4 things lets me know you're around. I thank you for all that as well. Any engagement you are willing to do may help me make this channel more popular. As always, I appreciate the view. If you enjoyed hearing this video and what could be the reason why we are all here, then maybe, just maybe, you're like hearing other creation stories. I have a few other tales of how other cultures thought we got here on the channel. So, you should see last week's video over here, and I'll pop up the How Are We playlist right over there. Take a view. TLDR, I'm just some guy on the YouTube who did some reading on an interesting topic and shared it the best I could. Thank you all again. Please subscribe, and as always, take care, keep safe.